Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan, and welcome to the latest edition of our entertainment show, where we look at this month. We're looking at cult classic documentaries that have spanned the time going back from the 80s, the 90s, the noughties, and into the earliest 21st sort of century. Classic TV series that have left their mark on the industry. And this month, we're looking at the one and only Gotham. It's to do with an early Bruce Wayne, an early James Gordon. It came out in 2014 to 2019, and it has definitely left its mark in the industry and will be talked about for a long time to come. Our guest this evening, he played the sidekick of Oswald Cobblepot in season 4 and season 5. He appeared for over 10 episodes throughout the 2 seasons. He played the illustrious character, the one and only Mr. Penn, the one and only Andrew Sellon. Andrew, good day to you, sir. And Andrew, as a young kid growing up, did you don the cape of a Batman or a Spider-Man or climbing walls or Superman, thinking you could fly around the house? Was the goal to be a superhero as a young boy?
You know, it's a funny thing. It kind of wasn't in my childhood. I mean, they were there. I watched the 60s Batman series, of course, because we all did. And it was very silly and very funny with a lot of great talent in it. But yeah, my mother didn't want the superhero comics in the house because she thought they were too violent. Ironically, she didn't have any trouble with me watching Looney Tunes classic cartoons, so I got my violence kick there, I guess. But I had no frame of reference for Gotham until the audition came in, which was, I know, sort of unusual. Yeah, other friends played it, Batman or whatever, stuff like that. It just wasn't as big a thing in my childhood. And when Gotham came along, it was like, okay, this is a really cool world, you know?
And Andrew, you mentioned Gotham came along. I suppose Gotham was in roughly 3 seasons it had been done at that stage. It was shooting in New York. It was a big thing shown in cable TV across all of America, probably across Europe and the world at that sort of stage. People were beginning to talk about it. It was beginning to get rave reviews. So when the agent came about this sort of offer, were you aware from the start it was Gotham? Were you aware the character was very much sort of classified before you went into the audition and you read for the role?
Well, no, I knew I was going in for Gotham. And the interesting thing about the audition, and this doesn't happen a lot, the writers basically knew my first episode was originally supposed to be my only episode, which was episode 401, the season premiere. And the way it went down is I got the sides, and there weren't a lot of lines. It was a couple of lines and a reaction. They needed basically a character that the young Bruce Wayne, first time cowled, steals a document from this character, Penn. But when I went into audition, they didn't even know whether Penn was male or female. When I walked into the audition room, it was a mix of men and women of all ages and shapes and sizes. So it really was, it was up for grabs. It was all down to who put on camera what most looked like Penn to them. And I'm, you know, sometimes in your life you get lucky, and that was an incredibly lucky day for me.
And you mentioned the character Mr. Penn. It was supposed to be a one-time sort of role you mentioned there. But the one thing about Gotham, and speak to a number of people in this, is in terms of Gotham, you don't have one, a cat has 9 lives. But in Gotham, it seems every character has an extra sort of one. So even if you die, you're not technically sort of dead. So once you came off that sort of first episode of shooting with Gotham, I know you were sort of gotten the contract, well, this might be a one-time gig. But when you heard of all the characters doing recurring sort of roles being brought back, was there a bit of optimism or a bit of hope that the door might be alive for Mr. Penn to have a run in Gotham?
There was, you know, to her credit, my agent had asked them initially when I booked the gig. She said, as any good agent should, so the breakdown says possible recurring for, you know, something 1 or 2 episodes maybe. And what they said to her at the time was, if we like the person on screen and we like the person on the soundstage, we like the way they work with other people, then the character might recur. It's, you know, we aren't promising anything. And I got in there, and the first episode, it was season premiere, so Danny Cannon was directing it. executive producer and one of the two. He and Bruno made Gotham. So I was working with Danny right out of the gate, and I really loved it. I really loved the brief time I had. I was, I think, 3 days on set. And as I was on the train, just about to get onto the subway to head home, my agent called and she said, they love you and they're going to put you in another couple of episodes. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then then the fans decided they liked me and it just kept going.
And I suppose the character, Mr. Penn, initially he was a sort of a quiet, sort of reserved man in terms of all that was going around the sort of Gotham universe. He didn't really a guy that really didn't really stand out in terms of the big brother. A guy possibly in the shadows that you felt that was just doing his bit to stay out of trouble. But in terms of how exciting was when you learned the script, then when you heard this sort of bipolar, schizophrenic sort of action that they were going to take with Mr. Penn and the whole sort of ventriloquist thing where he just went off the looper, as the saying goes.
Round the bend. It's an amazing and crazy story, because when they hired me for Mr. Penn, they didn't even know I was a ventriloquist. I didn't even have it on my resume at the time. So they had no clue that was even in the offing as far as my skills. And I had taken it off because when I was 19 years old, I moved to the city when I was young, 19. And I got a couple of auditions as a ventriloquist. And all they wanted was for ventriloquists with dummies that talked dirty, basically.
Okay.
And I was a kid and I was just like, if that's what ventriloquism is in New York City, I don't want that on my resume. So I took it off. Gotham had no idea I was actually a ventriloquist, but they had been thinking, well, the show was originally planned for 7 seasons, as you probably know, 7 22 episode seasons. And they had been going back and forth, really wanting, some of the producers were especially keen on getting the ventriloquist in there. So once Mr. Penn kind of took off and became kind of a Gotham family member, they were like, well, there's a logic here because he seems so much like, Arnold Wesker. And then right when they were making the plans to morph me into the ventriloquist, Fox canceled us.
Okay.
So then they came back to me, and instead of saying, well, guess what, you're going to have, recurring guest star role for the next 3 years, they said, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to kill you instead.
Okay.
So it was, it was a real reversal. They killed off Tabitha in episode 501, which was a great shock to the fans because she was a series regular, and then they killed me off in episode 503. And it was really wild because at the time, everybody felt that it shouldn't be happening, but they said to me, look, we only have 10 episodes. Fox has given us 10 episodes to turn, a teenage boy into Batman. We thought we had a lot more time and now we don't. So we have to just jettison a lot of the other subplots and really focus on the making of Batman. And I completely understood, but it still broke my heart when I had to die. And at least they gave me a scene where I died in Oswald Cobblepot's arms, in Robin's arms, which was great because we got on so well and had such a great time together. And then literally, and I don't know if you know this, Jim, but it was when they were filming the finale of the entire series, episode 10 that Fox had given them. They were already there. It was scripted. It was being shot on set when Fox said to them, oh, you know what? You can have 2 more episodes.
Okay.
And so they had to just jump back and say, okay, 2 more episodes, but we have to fit them into a timeline that we've already created and shot.
Okay. So
they came up with, 2 more episodes that had to sort of be freestanding. And it was at that point, after I'd already said goodbye to everybody and wept and all that stuff, and I was at home and I heard this news from my friend Shelby, who worked for one of the producers, and she's like, we just got 2 more episodes. And I was like, I'm already dead. What have I got to lose? Yeah. So I wrote to John Stevens, the showrunner, and I said, look, this is fate. You didn't know I was a ventriloquist when you hired me. Fans have been begging me to be turned into the ventriloquist. now we have a chance that we thought we didn't have, we thought was taken away from us. Even if it's for one episode, even if it's one scene, wouldn't it be cool if we put me in the room with a ventriloquist dummy? Even if we just did that and gave the fans that.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's such a great, he's wonderful. Everything John does is terrific. Everybody on Gotham. I mean, that's something you should know, and I'm sure you heard it from everybody. What a fantastic family it was. Really, really respected each other, and everybody really loved each other. I never saw crosswords. People just got on and dug into the work together. So I just said, what the heck? And I wrote to John and said, look, maybe it's worth considering, since you've got 2 more episodes and you have to come up with plots for them. And he sent the nicest note back, and he said, you know, no matter what happens, thank you again for everything, you know, that you did with Gotham, because we love you and we love your work. And he said, but you know what? I will tell you that the ventriloquist is now back on the table. Okay. And 2 days later, literally 2 days later, I heard nothing else. 2 days later, my agent calls me. She's like, I thought you were dead.
Yeah.
So that was it. And from there on, it had to happen very, very fast. Okay. They had to create Mr. Scarface within like a couple of weeks. So the props people, you know, I told them what to look for. They still didn't quite believe I was a ventriloquist. So I had to go in an hour before the table read with the only dummy I had at the time, and have a conversation with Ken Fink, our wonderful director, and the first AD. And I could see everybody just starting to breathe, because they were like, we thought we were going to have to ADR and add all the Mr. Scarface lines later. And they're like, you actually are a ventriloquist. And I'm like, we weren't kidding. It's true. It's fate. Let's just ride it. So they built out Mr. Scarface using a used dummy that they bought from somebody in Florida, I think. And Giovanni built this incredibly scary face on top of the existing head. And literally they finished tweaking the costume and handed him to me, and I walked on the stage and we started shooting. It was that tight.
Wow. And Andrew, you saw so many recurring sort of characters in Gotham. And was there any sort of characters that you saw during your time there where you said, wow, that's an interesting character, I would love to see that sort of played out, or I wouldn't mind playing that role myself in terms of that? Was there any sort of characters that really, as a recurring actor yourself, that you saw that really caught your eye and said, wow, that's really intriguing from your time when you're on the set of Gotham?
That's a great question. I mean, who wouldn't want to be the Penguin? Who wouldn't want to be the Riddler? Especially, you know, 2 memorable things. But also, how could you top Robin and Corey? Because they're just so fabulous. And what I love about Gotham is that it was a very specific take on each of these characters. And they gave each of us a lot of leeway to run with it. I think that was one of the great strengths of the producers and the writers. What a great writers' room we had. They really watched what people could do, and then they built on that. I mean, so yeah, I'm sure it would have been great to be the Penguin or the Riddler or something like that. But for me, ironically, just because of my own upbringing, you know, you said, did you watch or read Batman comics when you're a kid? No. When I was a kid, the cool thing as a teenager was ventriloquism and chess. Those were the 2 cool things, you know, or at least cool things for nerds, which I was. So already it just seemed such a thing of fate when I got Mr. Penn, and then Mr. Penn turned into ventriloquist. It's like, there really isn't another Batman villain. And let's face it, the villains have the most fun. There wasn't another villain who could have been more perfect for me. Just as each thing was so right. Robin was just the most wonderful Oswald Cobblepot, so complicated. And the work that Corey did with the 2 Edwards, you know, Edward and Crazy Riddler, really, it's just wonderful work. I was so psyched that in my final episode, I finally got to work with Corey.
Okay. And Andrew, is it a busy time for you at the moment? Are you heavily involved in projects, maybe TV series, movies in the pipeline that we're going to see maybe later on in the year here in Ireland, or possibly early in 2022 for you?
Actually, just had a fleeting role in Halston, which just came out a couple of months ago on Netflix. That was
Okay.
literally the last thing I shot. I'm in the first scene of the first episode of that series. And we shot that, and about a week or so later, the lockdown happened.
Okay.
So things are still waking up here, and what I've been doing in the meantime, Halston is now out and playing, which is great because I'm really thrilled with, I think that's a great production as well. I've been doing a lot of writing during the lockdown.
Okay.
So I have a solo show about Lewis Carroll and Alice that I've been working around and developing regionally. And now I'm going to try to, once it's possible to be in a theater again, I want to mount a full production of that. And I just wrote another solo piece, which I'm beyond excited about. And I can't talk about it yet because I'm going to just start showing it around. But keep an eye out because I'm excited for some of the stuff that I've got going on.
And Andrew, I suppose the penultimate question for you now, and probably the hardest question I'm going to ask you. Let's pretend there was a Gotham encyclopedia or dictionary as such, and they put your character, Mr. Penn, the ventriloquist side of him, Scarface, they put that into the dictionary in terms of the synopsis of the character. They left 2 blank sentences underneath. So they left the 2 or 3 blank sentences underneath. And the talent agent came to you, Andrew, and said, listen, they're doing a Gotham encyclopedia, a sort of dictionary as such. And they came to your character, Mr. Penn, and they want you to write the synopsis of what he was about to portray him. As an actor, Andrew, having portrayed that role, what would you like those 2 sentences to read?
Wow, Jim. That's a question I'd have to think about on the spot, huh? Boy, oh boy.
There's always a catchy one.
Yeah, exactly, right? This is the $64,000 question here. To be true to Arnold Wesker, who was the ventriloquist in the original DC comics, and actually, I think I am the last person to become a canon villain on the Gotham series, which is cool. So I don't know, maybe something along the lines of, if you push too hard, things split. And then look out. What I think is great about the character of the ventriloquist, and that I think we captured, I wish we'd had a lot more time. And you know what? I don't believe bullets mean anything. I still believe that Mr. Scarface and I are out there waiting for another DC project to come out, because there's so much to explore with this man who has such an incredible alter ego. And it's very different from Enigma and the Riddler. This mousy guy who everybody takes for granted, and then suddenly he finds his voice.
And I suppose, Andrew, to finish off, and we've been asking all the people who have participated in the show, is there any particular sort of memory or sort of story that's sort of unique and personal to you for your time in Gotham? Say maybe was in terms of shooting, or in terms of shooting an episode, or between takes, or something that made or a particular day, something that was sort of memorable to you that sort of you will always sort of remember, and I remember that day, or I remember that particular incident, or I remember that interaction with that actor or actress off set, or something particular unique to you that you would like to share.
Wow. Boy, I can think of so many little ones. I'll give you a couple quick ones. Day 1 of the table read for episode 401. First day at Steiner Studios, first and presumably only episode on Gotham. I didn't know what I was getting into. Everybody else was coming back from summer break because they'd done 3 seasons together. They were already a family, and I was the new kid on the block. And as far as they were concerned, I was just a guy who was in for 1 episode, and they'd never see me again. And people were very gracious. And I found out that Donald actually and I both went to Harvard, so we got to say a little something about that together. But I was still like, oh my gosh, I'm sort of the man on the outside of this wonderful family. And then Cameron came in, and she went and she hugged and said hello to all the series regulars. And then she just walked right up to me. She didn't even know who the heck I was. And she gave me a big hug, and she just looked me right in the eyes and she said, welcome.
Okay. Wow.
And I thought, wow, this is a world I want to live in. Okay. And a lasting one, because I had so much fun with Robin, and I hope Robin and I get to do stuff together again, because gosh, it was hard dying, but we were both having a hard time getting through that scene in episode 503. But when I came back, the day I came back to Steiner to shoot my last episode and turn into the ventriloquist, the first person I ran into in the hallway on the way to the makeup rooms was Robin.
Okay.
And he just looked at me and he burst into this huge smile and he gave me a big hug and he said, "You're canon, baby." And I just thought, wow, I don't think it gets better than that.
Yeah. On that note, Andrew Sellon, an absolute pleasure talking to you for a special look at Gotham in our cult classic documentaries, looking at Gotham especially for this month in particular. Thanks for sharing your memories of playing Mr. Penn and Scarface, and your obviously your marvelous skills as a ventriloquist, and
Not easy, is it?
also playing a multi-dimensional character in Mr. Penn. Andrew, we wish you a pleasant 2021, maybe a prosperous for you. And as you said, who knows, Scarface, he's hanging around the place. There could be animated, there could be voiceover roles for him yet to come. And obviously we see all these remakes and animated makes, and there could be a future, a bright future for yet him to come, maybe TV, video games and sort of stuff like that. So never say never. And as we say, no one truly dies on Gotham.
No one stays dead in Gotham, Jim.
Take care, Andrew. Goodbye.
Take care.